April 23, 1945, near Landsberg, Bavaria. The war in Europe had 8 days left, though nobody kneeling in that muddy field knew it yet. 14 German boys pressed their knees into the cold earth and waited to die. The youngest among them was 12 years old, the oldest 16. They wore Wehrmacht jackets that hung from their malnourished frames like costumes in some terrible play. Their boots were mismatched, scavenged from wherever boots could be found. Their hands were bound behind their backs with American rope that smelled of hemp and diesel fuel. Behind them, American soldiers stood in formation, rifles loaded, safeties off. Martin Richter, 14 years old, kept his eyes shut tight. His lips moved in silent prayer, though he had stopped believing in God somewhere between Munich and this field. He whispered to his mother instead, "Vergib mir, Mutti. Forgive me, mother." The metal click of rifle safeties echoed across the silence like a death sentence being read aloud. Martin's throat constricted. He could not swallow, could not breathe, could only wait for the bullets that would end everything. He had been taught that American soldiers showed no mercy to captured Germans. His Hitler Youth instructors had been very clear about that. Very specific. They had shown photographs, told stories, made certain every boy understood exactly what awaited him if he fell into enemy hands. Now, listening to the heavy boots shifting in mud behind him, Martin believed every word. To his left knelt Lucas Zimmermann, 16 and the oldest of their group. Lucas had tried to maintain order during their chaotic surrender 3 days earlier. He had been the one who convinced them to raise their hands instead of running. Now tears streaked through the dirt on his face, though he made no sound. On Martin's right, the Keller twins pressed so close together they might have been trying to become one person. Emil and Franz, 12 years old, had been in uniform for only 6 weeks. Their mother had hidden them as long as she could, but the final desperate call-ups had found them. Now Franz's lips moved in silent prayer, while Emil gripped his brother's hand with white-knuckled intensity. The sound of American voices carried across the field, too distant for the boys to understand the words. Martin caught fragments of English, a language that had been forbidden in school. He heard what sounded like laughter from the American lines. His stomach twisted. Were they laughing about what they were about to do? The footsteps behind him grew closer. Martin heard the distinctive sound of rifles being adjusted, equipment rustling, boots squelching in mud. This was it. He tried to remember the Lord's Prayer, but the words tangled in his mind like barbed wire. 12 days earlier, Martin Richter had been hiding in a cellar in Munich. The apartment building above him had been gutted by incendiary bombs 2 weeks prior. The cellar remained intact, a concrete tomb where Martin and his mother Anna had taken shelter from the nightly air raids. They had been living there for 6 days when the SS came. April 15th, 1945, a Sunday. 3 SS officers in black uniforms, perfect and pressed despite the world burning around them. "Males aged 12 and above," the officer announced. His voice was bored, mechanical. "Report to the assembly point immediately." Anna Richter stepped in front of her son. She was a small woman, thin from 2 years of rationing, but she stood between the SS officer and Martin like she could stop the entire Reich with her body. "He is only 14, she said. "A child." The officer looked at her the way one might look at a broken clock. "The Führer's order is clear. All males 12 and above, no exceptions." They grabbed Martin's arm. Anna reached for him, but the SS man held her back. "Stay alive," she told Martin. Her voice broke on the words. "Whatever happens, bleib am Leben. Stay alive." Those were the last words Martin heard from his mother. 43 boys had been collected by the time the trucks arrived. They were driven north through devastated German countryside, past columns of refugees, past broken Wehrmacht units retreating in disorder, past the smouldering remains of towns that had been erased by Allied bombing. On April 20th, Hitler's birthday, they arrived at a makeshift training facility outside Hamburg. The training lasted 18 hours. 18 hours to learn how to load and fire a Panzerfaust. 18 hours to be told that dying for the fatherland was the highest honor a German boy could achieve. 18 hours of propaganda about American cruelty, about execution squads, about torture camps. The instructors showed them photographs, bodies in ditches, prisoners shot in the back of the head. Americans take no prisoners, they were told. Surrender means torture. Surrender means death. Better to die fighting than to fall into their hands. Martin had believed him. Why wouldn't he? The officer was an adult, a veteran, someone who had fought the Americans and survived. On April 22nd, the Americans arrived. Not with the chaos the instructors had predicted, just tanks rolling down the road, soldiers in olive drab spreading out to search buildings, the methodical efficiency of an army that had already won. The German officers disappeared first, stripped off their insignia, changed into civilian clothes, vanished. They left the boys behind. Lucas Zimmermann had made the decision. They could run and likely be shot. They could fight and certainly be killed, or they could surrender and face whatever came next. So they had walked out of the schoolhouse with their hands raised, their rifles left behind. The American soldiers had shouted at them in English, words the boys could not understand. They had been herded into a truck, hands bound, searched roughly. Then they had been driven south, back through devastated Germany, to a field outside Landsberg, to their knees in the mud, to wait for the execution they had been promised would come. Captain James Holloway had seen many things during his 22 months in Europe that he wished he could forget. But standing in this Bavarian field, looking at 14 children in Wehrmacht uniforms, he felt something break inside his chest that had not broken yet despite everything else. The oldest could not be more than 16. Several looked barely into their teens, and 2 of them looked young enough to be in grade school back home in Richmond. These were not soldiers. These were children playing dress-up in a nightmare. Holloway was 34 years old, a lawyer from Richmond, Virginia, before the war. He had a wife named Eleanor and a son named Benjamin who had just turned 13. Ben liked baseball and hated mathematics and was currently worried about whether Sally Henderson would agree to be his date for the spring social. Normal 13-year-old concerns. The kind of concerns these German boys should have had instead of kneeling in mud waiting to die. Holloway reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open to the photograph he had looked at every night since leaving Virginia. Benjamin Holloway, 13 years old, wearing his baseball uniform, grinning at the camera with a gap where his left incisor should be. Holloway looked at the photograph. Then he looked at the boy, kneeling directly in front of him. 14, maybe. Same build as Ben. Same hollow cheeks from growing too fast. Same fear in his eyes, though Ben had never known fear like this and, God willing, never would. The boy's lips were moving, whispering something in German. His bound hands shook so badly, the rope seemed to vibrate. Holloway thought about Ben back home in Richmond, safe, playing baseball, worried about girls and dances and normal things. Then he thought about this boy's mother, somewhere in Germany, probably dead in the ruins of some bombed city. But maybe alive, maybe waiting, maybe hoping her son would come home. The boy in front of him could be Ben, in different circumstances, different country, different war. The only difference was an accident of birth. Holloway's hands tightened on the wallet. The photograph of Ben creased slightly under his thumb. Sergeant Owen McAllister stood beside him. Dutch, everyone called him, a farmer's son from Iowa who had volunteered the day after Pearl Harbor. Captain, Dutch said quietly, "We can't shoot children, sir. I don't care what uniform they're wearing." Holloway stared at the 14 boys, at their shaking hands, at their tears, at their absolute certainty that they were about to die. He thought about the orders he had received. These boys were technically enemy combatants. They had been found with weapons, wearing military uniforms, in an active combat zone. The regulations were clear. But the regulations had not contemplated this. The regulations did not account for 12-year-old twins who looked like they might die of fear before anyone laid a hand on them. Holloway looked at the photograph of Ben one more time. Then he closed the wallet, put it back in his pocket, made a decision that had nothing to do with regulations and everything to do with the fact that he was a father before he was a soldier. "Get the field kitchen set up," he ordered. Dutch McAllister stared at his commanding officer for 3 full seconds. "Sir, you want me to cook? Now?" "Get the field kitchen operational. I want a hot meal prepared for these prisoners." Dutch's face transformed as he understood. "What kind of meal, sir?" Your grandmother's fried chicken, Dutch. The recipe she sent you from Iowa. Can you make it with what we have? Dutch McAllister's grandmother had taught him to cook before he was old enough to help with the harvest. She had sent him her cast-iron skillet when he shipped out, insisting that no grandson of hers would eat poorly cooked food, even in a war. Yes, sir, I can make it. Then do it. And, Dutch, set up the kitchen where they can see you, where they can hear it, where they can smell it. The soldiers moved with purpose, setting up the portable field kitchen just 30 yards from where the boys knelt. Dutch worked quickly, building a fire, heating lard in the cast-iron skillet. Martin Richter, still kneeling with his eyes closed, heard the activity, but could not process what it meant. The sounds were all wrong for an execution. He heard equipment being moved, metal clanking, someone building a fire, the crackle of wood catching flame. He risked opening his eyes just a fraction. He saw American soldiers setting up what looked like a cooking station. Why would they cook before shooting prisoners? What kind of torture was this? Then the smell reached him. It drifted across the 30 yards and hit Martin with the force of a physical blow. Hot fat, seasoned flour, chicken skin beginning to crisp in a skillet. The smell of cooking food. Real food. Not the thin soup and stale bread they had subsisted on for weeks. The smell of his mother's kitchen on Sunday afternoons before the war. Martin's stomach clenched so hard it hurt. He had not realized how hungry he was until that moment. Now, smelling something that reminded him powerfully of home, of safety, of everything he had lost, his body remembered what it meant to be fed properly. He heard the sizzle. Heard Dutch McAllister humming some American tune. Heard the American soldiers talking in relaxed voices like they were preparing for a picnic instead of an execution. Martin could not stop himself from looking up fully now. They were not preparing for an execution. They were preparing a meal. Beside him, Lucas made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "Kochen Sie?" he whispered in German. "Are they cooking?" The Keller twins had both opened their eyes now, staring at the American soldiers with expressions of complete bewilderment. Martin felt tears forming in his eyes. For reasons he could not fully articulate, the smell reminded him of everything he had lost. His mother, standing at the stove in their Munich apartment before the bombs, before the war consumed everything. He had been so certain he would never experience anything like that again. He had been prepared to die. But now, kneeling in Bavarian mud while American soldiers fried chicken 30 yards away, he felt something crack open inside his chest that he thought had been sealed shut forever. Captain James Holloway carried the first plate himself. He walked slowly across the muddy field, a metal plate in his hands, still steaming from the heat of freshly cooked chicken. The 14 boys watched him approach with expressions that cycled through fear, confusion, and desperate hope. Holloway stopped in front of Martin Richter and knelt down so they were at eye level. The boy flinched, anticipating a blow or worse. But Holloway simply reached behind Martin's back and cut the ropes binding his wrists. "Essen," Holloway said, using one of the few German words he knew. "Eat." He placed the plate on the ground between them. Up close, he could see that Martin was younger than Ben, despite being a year older. Malnutrition had hollowed out his cheeks, made his eyes too large for his face. Holloway gestured, bringing his hand to his mouth, making the meaning clear. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet again, opened it to Ben's photograph, held it where Martin could see. "Mein Sohn," Holloway said, mangling the German pronunciation. "My son, Benjamin, 13. He pointed at Martin, then at the photograph, then back at Martin. "You, him, say." Martin's eyes moved from the plate to the photograph to Holloway's face. Then his hands, shaking like leaves in a storm, reached for the chicken. Dutch McAllister brought more plates, placing one in front of each kneeling boy, cutting ropes, offering canteens of water. Martin Richter picked up the chicken drumstick. It was still warm. Grease glistened on the golden brown crust. He brought it to his mouth and bit down. The taste exploded across his tongue with an intensity that made him dizzy. Salt, fat, the crunch of perfectly fried coating giving way to tender meat. The kind of food he had not experienced since before his father left for the Eastern Front. He began to cry while chewing. He could not stop himself. The flood of emotion broke through every defense he had built. He cried for his mother, for his father who was never coming home, for his lost childhood, for the relief of not being shot, for the taste of something that reminded him he was still human. Once Martin started, the dam broke for the others. Lucas grabbed his plate with shaking hands and ate with desperate efficiency. Tears streamed down his face, but he made no sound except wet gasps between bites. The Keller twins ate more slowly, looking at each other between bites, as if confirming this was really happening. Emil bit into his chicken and immediately burst into sobs. Franz put his arm around his brother's shoulders, still chewing, tears running into his own mouth. 14 boys ate fried chicken in a Bavarian field and wept. Captain James Holloway watched them, watched Martin cry into his plate, watched the terror slowly drain from their faces, replaced by confusion, then wonder, then something that might eventually become trust. Dutch McAllister stood beside him. "Captain," he said quietly, "what happens now?" Holloway looked at the 14 boys, at their hollow cheeks filling with food, at their shaking hands beginning to steady. "Now," Holloway said, "we figure out how to send them home." April 24th, 1945. Day 1 of what would become 7 days that changed everything. Dawn came cold and clear. Martin woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee. He sat up on his cot, momentarily disoriented, then remembered where he was. Still alive. Still in the American camp. Still, somehow, safe. Through the tent flap, he could see Sergeant McAllister working at the field kitchen. Martin walked outside, still wearing the oversized American fatigues they had been given the night before. Dutch McAllister looked up and gestured Martin over. "Guten Morgen," Dutch said. Then, in English, "You help, yes?" Martin approached tentatively. Dutch handed him a wooden spoon and pointed at a large bowl of pancake batter. "Stir," Dutch said, demonstrating the motion. "Keep it smooth. No lumps." Martin took the spoon and began stirring. The motion was familiar. His mother had taught him to make pancakes when he was 8 years old, before the war. They worked in companionable silence. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the frost. Other boys began emerging from the tent, all wearing American uniforms too large for their frames, all moving slowly, as if afraid this reality might shatter. Dutch put Martin in charge of flipping pancakes. He showed Martin how to wait for the bubbles to form on the surface, how to flip with a quick wrist motion. Martin's first attempt landed half on the griddle, half on the ground. Dutch laughed. Not mockery, just warm amusement. He picked up the fallen pancake, tossed it in the scrap bucket, and gestured for Martin to try again. The second pancake flipped perfectly. Dutch clapped him on the shoulder and grinned. Natural, like Iowa farm boy. Martin did not understand all the words, but he understood the approval, the warmth, the simple human connection of teaching and learning something that had nothing to do with war. He felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Pride. Simple, uncomplicated pride in doing something well. After breakfast, Private Elijah Foster approached the group of German boys. Foster was 24, Irish-American, from Boston. He had red hair and freckles and a Boston accent thick enough to cut with a knife. He had also lost 2 brothers at Normandy Beach. For 18 months, Foster had carried a hatred of Germans that burned like phosphorus. Every German soldier he saw was the soldier who killed Patrick, who killed Sean. But standing in front of 14 boys who looked like they should be in school, Foster found that his hatred had nowhere to land. He pulled out a small notebook and a pencil, drew a simple picture of a man pointing at himself. "Elijah," he said slowly, pointing at his own chest. Then he pointed at Martin, raised his eyebrows in question. Martin understood. "Martin," he said. "Martin Richter." Foster wrote it down. Then he drew another picture. A house, pointed at Martin. "Where? Home. You." "Wünschen," Martin said. Then, searching for the English word, "Munich." Foster nodded, drew a picture of Boston, pointed at himself. "My home, Boston." Over the next hour, they built a vocabulary. Foster teaching English words, Martin teaching German equivalents, both laughing at mispronunciations. The laughter felt strange, foreign, like a language Martin had forgotten how to speak. By midday, Martin had learned 20 English words. Hello, thank you, water, food, home, mother, father, safe, help, friend. That last one stuck in his throat. Friend. A word that felt impossible between enemies. But Foster had said it with such earnest simplicity that Martin could not help but repeat it. Friend, Martin said carefully. Freund, Foster grinned. Yeah, friends. He extended his hand. Martin shook it. The gesture felt ceremonial, important. The afternoon brought baseball. The Americans set up a makeshift diamond in the field. They tried to explain the rules, struck out with language barriers. Finally, Dutch just demonstrated. Tossed the ball to Foster. Foster hit it. Dutch ran. Martin stepped up to bat on the third inning. Foster pitched gently. The ball came slow and perfect, and Martin swung with all the pent-up fear and relief channeled through his arms. He connected. The ball sailed over Foster's head, past the outfield, into the trees. Home run, except Martin did not know the rules. He stood confused. Run, Foster shouted, laughing. Run the bases! Martin ran, but clockwise instead of counterclockwise. Wrong direction entirely. The Americans erupted in laughter. Not cruel, just delighted. Dutch nearly fell over. By the time Martin completed his backward circuit, everyone was laughing. The German boys, the American soldiers, even Martin himself. Holloway walked over and ruffled Martin's hair, a gesture so casual, so fatherly, that Martin felt tears prick his eyes. Your son, Martin said in broken English. He play this? Baseball? Holloway pulled out the photograph again. Captain of his team, 3 years running. Martin studied the picture. Ben Holloway looked so normal, so impossibly far from everything Martin had become. He is lucky, Martin said. Holloway seemed to understand what Martin could not articulate. You can be lucky too, Martin. War doesn't last forever. You can go home, be a normal boy again. Martin wanted to believe him, but he thought of Munich in ruins, of his mother missing. I hope, was all he could say. That evening they sat around the fire. Germans and Americans mixed together now, language barriers bridged by gestures and laughter. Foster pulled out a harmonica, played something Irish and melancholy. When he finished, Lucas sang a German folk song. Then Dutch contributed a work song from Iowa. Music became the conversation they could not have with words. Martin sat between Foster and Dutch, feeling the warmth of the fire on his face, and thought, this is what peace feels like. April 26, 1945, Day 3. The radio message came at 11:47 a.m. Captain Holloway took the transmission in the command tent. Martin, helping Dutch prepare lunch, saw Holloway's face change as he listened. When Holloway emerged, he walked directly to where the boys were gathered. I need to tell you something, he said. Dutch translated into halting German. Headquarters is sending an inspector. Major Richard Aldridge arrives May 1st. His orders are to transfer all juvenile prisoners to Fort McCallum Youth Labour Facility. Martin caught enough English. Transfer, facility. Dutch's face, as he translated, confirmed Martin's fears. What is Fort McCallum? Lucas asked. Dutch hesitated. Holloway put a hand on his shoulder. Tell them the truth. It's a labour camp, Dutch said quietly, for juvenile prisoners. Hard work, not much food, not like here. The warmth drained from the afternoon. When? Martin asked. 7 days, Holloway said. May 1st. But I'm going to fight this. I'm going to find another way. Martin wanted to believe him, but he had learned that adults made promises they could not keep. Captain, Martin said, you try, but they send us anyway, is how it works. Holloway knelt down eye level with Martin. Not this time. You're not my enemy, Martin. You're someone's son, just like Ben. I'm going to find a way. The clock had started ticking. 7 days to find a solution that probably did not exist. April 27th, 1945, Day 4. The Red Cross reports arrived. 3 manila envelopes, stamped with official seals and the weight of bad news. Holloway gathered the boys after breakfast. We have news about your families, he said. Dutch translated. He opened the first envelope. Emil and Franz Keller, your mother Greta is alive. She is in a displaced persons camp near Frankfurt. She wants you home. The twins grabbed each other. Relief and joy and complicated grief. Franz began crying. Emil held him, tears streaming down his own face. Holloway opened the second envelope. Lucas Zimmermann. Hamburg was heavily bombed in 1943. Your family's name does not appear on any survivor registries. I'm sorry. Lucas took the news without expression, just nodded once. He had expected this. Holloway opened the third envelope. His hands were shaking slightly. Martin Richter. Your mother, Anna Richter, was last seen in Munich on April 15th. Munich has sustained severe damage. Your mother's name does not appear on survivor lists. She is currently classified as missing. Missing. Not dead. Missing. Martin's face remained blank. He heard the information, processed it, filed it away. Missing does not mean dead, Holloway said gently. Red Cross is still searching. Martin nodded. I wait. Mother is strong. She survive. I know. But he did not know. Could not know. The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. Holloway pulled out his compass, the brass instrument he had carried since officer training. He placed it in Martin's hands. When the war ends, this will help you find home. Martin looked at the compass. Directions to a home that might not exist anymore. What if home is gone? He asked. Then you build a new one, Holloway said. But you don't forget the old one. You carry it with you. In here. He touched Martin's chest, over his heart. Martin closed his fist around the compass. The metal was warm from Holloway's hand. April 28th, 1945. Day 5. The day Holloway took them to see the truth. There's something you need to see, Holloway said at breakfast. Something you need to understand about what you were part of. He loaded all 14 boys into a truck, drove them 15 miles south. They arrived at a place with no name on any map Martin had seen, but it had a smell. The smell reached them before they could see the camp itself. Death, decay, human waste, suffering concentrated into an odor that bypassed thought. Franz leaned over the side of the truck and vomited. Emil followed seconds later. The truck stopped at gates marked with no sign. American soldiers stood guard. Their faces carried horror and rage and grief. This is Kaufering, Holloway said, a sub-camp of Dachau. It was liberated yesterday. The people who ran this camp wore the same uniform you wore, served the same government, followed the same flag. They walked through the gates. Martin saw the barracks first. Wooden structures that should have held 50 people. The Americans had counted them. 400 people per barracks, packed so tightly there was no room to lie down. He saw the survivors who remained. Living skeletons, skin stretched over bones, eyes too large for their faces. One survivor was a child, maybe 10 years old, maybe younger. The child wore prison stripes too large for his skeletal frame, stared at Martin with eyes that had seen things no child should see. Martin's stomach heaved. An army chaplain met them at the center of the camp. 11 million people were murdered in camps like this, the chaplain said. Dutch translated, his voice breaking. Jews, Roma, political prisoners, disabled people, anyone the Reich deemed unworthy of life, murdered systematically. He led them to the crematorium. The ovens were cold now, but evidence remained. Ash, bone fragments, scratches on the walls where fingernails had clawed concrete. Martin fell to his knees. Das haben wir getan, he whispered. This we did. Wir haben das getan. The weight crushed him. The uniform he had worn, the flag he had saluted, the government he had served. This was what it had been for. Lucas stood beside Martin, tears streaming. We didn't know, he said. But even as he spoke, he wondered if that was true. There had been whispers, rumors dismissed as enemy propaganda. The chaplain's voice was gentle but uncompromising. You were children. You were lied to. But now you know the truth. The question is, what you do with that knowledge. They walked back through the camp in silence, past the barracks, past the survivors, past the evidence of systematic evil. Martin picked up a child's shoe. Small, maybe for an 8-year-old, The leather was worn. The sole had a hole. A child had worn the shoe, had lived in it, had died in it. Martin put the shoe in his pocket, a weight he would carry, a reminder he would not allow himself to forget. That night, around the fire, no one spoke for an hour. Finally, Martin broke the silence. Wie leben wir? He asked. How do we live, knowing this? Holloway looked at the 14 boys, at their faces showing trauma of truth. By choosing who you become next, he said. You were children who believed lies. That doesn't erase what happened, but it means you have a choice about what happens next. Foster added, My brothers died fighting this evil. You didn't know it existed. Now you do. You can let it destroy you, or you can become men who make sure it never happens again. Martin thought about his mother's last words. Bleib am Leben. Stay alive. I choose, he said quietly. I choose to remember. And to be different. April 29th, 1945. Day 6. The letter arrived. A Red Cross worker brought it to camp in the morning. A single envelope, addressed to Martin Richter, forwarded through multiple displaced persons camps. The postmark read, April 16th, 1945, the day after Martin had been taken. Martin's hands shook as he opened it. The handwriting was his mother's. He read in German. Dutch stood nearby, but Martin did not need translation. Mein liebster Martin, it began. My dearest Martin, if you read this, I am likely gone. Munich burns every night now. I hide in the cellar, but the walls grow weaker. I do not think they will hold much longer. When they took you yesterday, I watched you walk away. You looked back 3 times. I should have told you then, but I could not speak through my tears. You are a good boy, a kind boy. What they will tell you, that enemies deserve no mercy, that cruelty is strength, these are lies. Remember, I raised you to see people, not sides, to give bread to the hungry, whoever they are, to choose kindness even when the world demands hatred. If you survive, promise me this. Stay kind. Build, don't destroy. Be the man I raised you to be, not the soldier they want you to become. The world will be broken when this war ends, but broken things can be mended. Choose to be someone who mends. I love you always. You were the best thing I ever did. Mutti. Martin read it twice, then a 3rd time. His vision blurred with tears. She had known what they would teach him, and she had written him the truth before the bonds could take her voice forever. She knew, Martin said finally. She knew what they would do, and she told me truth. Smart woman, your mother, Holloway said. Martin folded the letter carefully, put it in his breast pocket, over his heart, next to the photograph of Ben Holloway and the child's shoe from Kaufering. 3 weights he would carry. If she is dead, Martin said slowly, I must live how she wanted. For her. It was the first time he had said it out loud. I choose, Martin said again, touching the letter over his heart. I choose to be what she wanted. Kind. Building, not destroying. Holloway put a hand on Martin's shoulder. She'd be proud of you. April 30th, 1945. Day 7. The radio brought news that changed the world. Adolf Hitler was dead. Suicide in his Berlin bunker. The Führer, who had promised a 1,000-year Reich, had lasted 12 years and 4 months before putting a pistol in his mouth. The German boys gathered around the radio. Dutch translated, though most understood enough English now. Dead. Top. Lucas Zimmermann's reaction was a bitter laugh. He gets to choose his death. We don't. Martin said nothing. Just thought about his mother's letter. Hitler had chosen hatred until it killed him. Martin would choose differently if he got the chance. Tomorrow, Major Aldridge would arrive. Tomorrow, the 7 days would be up. Tonight, they sat around the fire one last time. Dutch played harmonica. Foster sang an Irish ballad. Martin taught them a German lullaby his mother had sung to him. The music carried across the field and disappeared into the Bavarian night. Captain Holloway sat apart, writing letters by lantern light. His 50th letter to churches, organizations, families, asking, pleading, searching for homes for 14 boys. 49 letters had been sent already. A handful of responses. Interest, but not commitments. Not enough. Martin watched Holloway write and thought, he is trying. Even knowing he will fail, he is trying. That meant something. Maybe everything. May 1st, 1945. 10:17 a.m. Major Richard Aldridge arrived in a jeep with 2 military police officers and a clipboard thick with regulations. Aldridge was 45 years old, career military. His uniform was perfectly pressed despite 3 days of travel. His boots shined like black mirrors. He was a man who believed in rules, in orders, in the clarity of regulations. He found Captain Holloway in the command tent. "Captain Holloway," Aldridge said without preamble, "I'm here to collect the juvenile prisoners for transfer to Fort McCallum. Where are they?" Holloway stood. "Major Aldridge, thank you for coming. I'd like to discuss alternative—" "There are no alternatives, Captain. My orders are clear. Load them in the transport trucks. We leave in 1 hour. Sir, if you'd just give me a moment to explain." "Explain what? That you've been running a summer camp for enemy soldiers instead of a POW facility? I've read the reports. Fried chicken? Baseball games? This is a war, not a social club." Holloway's jaw tightened. "They're children, sir. They're enemy combatants who will be processed according to regulations. 1 hour, Captain. Have them ready." Aldridge turned to leave, but it was not over. Martin Richter stepped into the tent entrance, blocking Aldridge's path. The 14-year-old boy stood barely 5'6", wore an American uniform 3 sizes too large. But he stood his ground. "Sir," Martin said in careful English, "please, Captain Holloway, save us." Aldridge looked at the boy the way one might look at an inconvenient obstacle. "Step aside, son. We think American kill us," Martin continued. "We think execution, no mercy. This is what they teach us." "I said, step aside." "Captain Holloway, give chicken. Give food. Give kindness." Martin's voice grew stronger. "He see us as children, not enemy. Please, sir. Fort McCallum is bad place, yeah? We learn. We be good. Please." Aldridge's expression did not change. "This is a military matter, not your concern." But other boys had gathered now, standing behind Martin. Lucas spoke next. "He is good man, sir, like father to us." Emil stepped forward, tears streaming. "Please, we have no home. This is home now." Franz joined his brother. "We be good. We work. We learn. Please, not send away." All 14 boys standing together now, not blocking with threat, just with presence, with testimony. Aldridge looked at them, then at Holloway, then back at the boys. His hand moved to his jacket pocket, pulled out a photograph, stared at it. The photograph showed a girl, maybe 15, smiling, standing in front of a white house, Aldridge's daughter, Catherine. Holloway saw the photograph, understood, took the gamble. "They're the same age as your Catherine, aren't they, sir?" Aldridge's face remained stone, but his hand holding the photograph trembled slightly. "Captain Holloway," he said slowly, "you are requesting exemption from transfer orders based on what grounds?" Holloway chose his words carefully. "Humanitarian grounds, sir. These boys surrendered in good faith. They were promised safety. Fort McCallum breaks that promise. I'm requesting 30 days to find proper civilian placement through Red Cross and religious organization channels. And if you fail to find placement in 30 days, then I'll personally transport them to Fort McCallum myself and resign my commission." The tent was silent. Aldridge looked at his daughter's photograph one more time, then at the 14 boys, then at Holloway. 30 days, Captain, not 31. Every boy placed with verified sponsors, proper documentation, Red Cross oversight. If you fail, they all go to Fort McCallum, and you face disciplinary action." "Yes, sir. Understood." "And Captain, this better be worth ending your career over." Holloway looked at Martin, at 14 boys who had been given a chance. "It is, sir." Aldridge nodded once, turned to leave, paused at the tent flap. "My daughter is 15, he said without turning around. Piano lessons, worried about prom, normal things. He looked back. 30 days, make them count. Then he was gone. Martin turned to Holloway, threw his arms around the captain and held on like drowning. "Danke," he whispered. "Thank you. Thank you." Holloway held the 14-year-old boy and thought about Ben back home in Richmond, about every father's son, about the choice between regulations and mercy. He had chosen mercy. Now he had 30 days to make that choice mean something. The next 4 weeks became a blur of letters and desperate negotiation. Week 1. Holloway wrote to every church in Virginia, every Quaker organization, every humanitarian group. Martin helped, writing testimonial letters in German to German-American families. Responses trickled in, some interested, some willing. Not enough. Week 2. The Keller twins' fate resolved first. Their mother Greta was located at a displaced persons camp, healthy, desperately searching for her sons. The Red Cross arranged transport. Emile and Franz would go home. The morning they left, Dutch taught them one final recipe: scrambled eggs, his grandmother's way. "Remember us," Dutch said, pressing the handwritten recipe into Emile's hands. "Always," Emile promised. "We tell everyone about the Americans who were kind." They climbed into the Red Cross truck, waved until it disappeared. 12 boys remained. Week 3. Lucas found placement. A Mennonite family in Pennsylvania. Farmers who had sponsored German war orphans before. Lucas shook hands with every American soldier. Came last to Holloway. "You showed me," Lucas said, "that enemies can become brothers. I will not forget." He left on May 22nd. 11 boys remained. Over the next 3 days, 9 more boys found sponsors. Churches, families, organizations willing to give a second chance. By May 28th, only Martin Richter remained. 3 families had expressed interest in sponsoring him. Good families, willing families. But Martin refused all 3. "I wait," he told Holloway on May 28th, "for Mutti, mother. If she alive, she find Red Cross. She look for me. I must be findable." "Martin, your mother is listed as missing. It's been 6 weeks. If she were alive, the Red Cross would have found her by now." "I wait," Martin repeated, stubborn, certain. "One more day, please. If no news tomorrow, I go to fort. Is fair." Holloway wanted to argue. But he looked at Martin's face, at the determination there, at the loyalty to a mother who was almost certainly dead, and he could not force the boy to abandon hope. "One more day," Holloway said. "Tomorrow is the deadline. If no news by noon, you accept one of the sponsorships. Agreed?" "Agreed." May 29th, 1945. The last day. 11:47 a.m. Martin had packed his small bag, said his goodbyes, written a letter to Ben Holloway, thanking him for sharing his photograph and his father. He had accepted that his mother was gone, had made peace with choosing life. At noon, he would sign the papers, begin the process of immigration, start the long journey of becoming American. At 11:47 a.m., a Red Cross jeep pulled into camp. A young woman jumped out, ran to the command tent, emerged moments later with Holloway, both running toward where Martin sat. The woman carried a telegram. Yellow paper, official seal. Holloway's hands shook as he read it. His face transformed. Disbelief, then joy. "Martin," he said, "your mother, Anna Richter." Martin's heart stopped. She's alive. Time fractured. The world tilted. Found in Munich displaced persons camp. She was injured, had amnesia for 6 weeks. Her memory is returning. She's asking for you. She's alive, Martin. Your mother is alive. Martin took the telegram with hands that did not feel like his own, read the words in German. Red Cross official notification. Anna Richter located. Condition stable. Requesting reunion with son. He read it 3 times, 4 times, until the words became truth. His mother was alive. She had survived the bombs, the hunger, the chaos. She had survived, and she was looking for him. "Mutti," Martin whispered, then louder, "Mutti lebt." Mother lived. He looked at Holloway, at this American captain who had given him 7 weeks of mercy. "She alive," Martin said, tears streaming. "She alive. And I go home." Holloway pulled Martin into an embrace, both crying now, soldier and boy, American and German. Barriers dissolved in shared relief. "I told you," Holloway said. "Missing doesn't mean dead." June 1945. The final days together. Martin would return to Germany, to Munich, to his mother, and whatever remained of home. The Red Cross arranged transport. He would leave June 15th. Dutch spent 3 days teaching Martin everything he knew about cooking: fried chicken, pancakes, scrambled eggs, pot roast, apple pie. Wrote each recipe down in careful English with German translations. "Someday," Dutch said on the last day, "you cook these for me. In Germany. I visit, yeah?" "Promise," Martin said. "You come. I cook. We remember." Foster gave Martin his St. Christopher Medal, Irish Catholic tradition, protection for travellers. "Bring it back to me someday," Foster said. "Come to Boston. Meet my family. Show me you're doing good." "I promise," Martin said. "I come back to America when I am ready." Holloway's goodbye was hardest. The morning of June 15th, they stood by the truck that would take Martin to the Red Cross facility, then to Munich, then home. Holloway gave Martin the compass again, the brass instrument worn smooth by years of use. "Find your way home," Holloway said. "Then find your way back here, not to this field, but to America, to the promise of what you can become." He pulled out the photograph of Ben one more time, wrote on the back, "To Martin, my German son, remember who you are. Captain Holloway, June 1945. "My son will want to meet you someday," Holloway said. "When you're ready, when you've built your life, come to Richmond, meet Ben. Show me the man you became." Martin hugged Holloway, this American captain who had chosen to see a child instead of an enemy, who had fed him fried chicken when he expected bullets, who had given him a future when the world had given him only death. "Vater," Martin whispered. "Father." The word felt true. Blood did not make fathers. Choice did. "You were somebody's child," Holloway said. "I just remembered that when everyone else forgot." The truck engine started. Time to go. Martin climbed into the truck, looked back at Holloway, standing in the Bavarian field, where 7 weeks ago 14 boys had knelt, waiting to die. He looked back 3 times, just like he had looked back at his mother. Then the truck turned the corner, and Holloway disappeared from view. 30 years passed in the time it takes to tell it. Martin returned to Munich, found his mother in a displaced persons camp, thin, scarred by trauma, but alive. He held her for an hour without speaking. They rebuilt, slowly. Germany rebuilt too. Martin studied architecture, designed buildings meant to bring people together, churches, community centers, places where former enemies could meet as humans. He married Helena in 1952. 3 children followed. Anna, named for his mother, Sophie, Peter. He taught them about the war, about the camps, about the truth, but also about kindness, about the American captain who chose mercy. Every year on April 23rd, he wrote a letter to Captain Holloway in Richmond. Every year, Holloway wrote back. The correspondence continued for 3 decades. In 1975, Holloway retired from the federal bench. He had become a judge after the war, spent 30 years dispensing justice that remembered mercy. That October, he received a phone call. "Judge Holloway, this is Martin Richter, from Bavaria." 30 years dissolved. "Martin, my God! Martin, I am coming to America for Thanksgiving with my family. May we visit?" Holloway's voice broke. "You better. I've been saving a story for 30 years. November 27th, 1975. Thanksgiving Day, Richmond, Virginia. Martin Richter, 44 years old, stood at the airport with his wife and 3 children and felt like he was 14 again. The flight from Munich had taken 12 hours. The children were tired. Helena was nervous. But Martin felt only anticipation. 30 years. 3 decades since he had seen the man who saved his life. He walked through the arrival gate and saw Holloway immediately. 64 years old now. Hair white. Face lined by years. But the eyes were the same. Kind. Certain. Time stopped. "Captain," Martin said. Then he was running, crossing the terminal, 44 years old and running like a child toward a father. They collided in an embrace that bent time backward. Holloway holding Martin, Martin holding Holloway, both crying without shame. "You came back," Holloway said. "You actually came back." "I promised," Martin said. "I always keep promises." Benjamin Holloway stood nearby, 43 years old now, lawyer like his father. He watched his father embrace a German man he had never met, and understood this was important. Martin's daughter Anna, 14, watched too, confused but moved. "Papa," she whispered to her mother. "Why is Papa crying?" "Because that man saved his life," Helena said. "When your papa was your age, that man chose kindness when the world chose cruelty." Eleanor Holloway, 63, had prepared Thanksgiving dinner for 15 people. The long table in their backyard was set with her best china, but the centerpiece was provided by someone else. Sergeant Owen McAllister, 58, retired from the army, still living in Iowa, had driven 14 hours to be here. He brought his grandmother's cast-iron skillet. "Making the recipe," Dutch said when Martin saw him. "One more time, for the boy who learned to flip pancakes." They embraced. Two men who had been sergeant and prisoner, now just friends. Foster arrived last. Elijah Foster, 54, Boston police detective, Irish accent still thick. He wore his St. Christopher medal around his neck. Martin saw it and started crying again. "You kept it." "You promised to return it," Foster said. "Figured you'd want to see I took care of it." The Thanksgiving meal began at 4 p.m. 15 people around a table. Americans and Germans. 3 generations. Strangers becoming family through shared history. The food was traditional. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes. But the last dish Dutch brought to the table was fried chicken, made in his grandmother's cast-iron skillet. The same pan from 1945, seasoned by 30 more years of use. The recipe unchanged. The smell hit Martin like a freight train carrying memory. Hot fat, seasoned flour, chicken skin crisping, exactly like April 23rd, 1945. Exactly like the moment when death became life. Martin picked up a drumstick, still warm, grease glistening on golden brown crust. He brought it to his mouth. The taste transported him. 14 years old, muddy field, expecting bullets, receiving chicken. He began crying while chewing. His children stared. Anna reached for his hand. "Papa?" "This chicken," Martin said through tears. "This chicken saved my life." He set down the drumstick, stood, looked at Holloway. "Captain Holloway, Dutch, Elijah. 30 years ago you did not just feed a hungry boy. You showed me that humanity is stronger than hatred." His voice grew stronger. "My mother wrote me a letter, just before she almost died. She told me, stay kind. Build, not destroy. See people, not enemies." I could only follow her words because you showed me they were true. You saw 14 enemies and fed them. You saw children instead of soldiers. You chose mercy when the world demanded cruelty. You saved my soul, not just my body. Martin pulled blueprints from his briefcase, unfolded them on the table. The Holloway McAllister Center, Munich, opening next spring, Youth Education Center. We feed 200 children daily. We teach them, see people, not sides. Feed the hungry, whoever they are. Build instead of destroy. Dutch stared at the blueprints, at his name in German and English. "You named it after us?" "After the men who taught me what those words mean." Holloway could not speak, could only stare at evidence that his choice in a Bavarian field had multiplied across 30 years into something that would outlive them all. Ben Holloway looked at his father. "Dad, you never told me the whole story." "Some stories are too important to tell wrong," Holloway said. "I was waiting for Martin to tell it right." The meal continued, stories shared, laughter rising, barriers dissolving in the warmth of a Thanksgiving table. As the sun set, a photographer Martin had hired took pictures, recreating the photo from 1945. Holloway center. Dutch left, Foster right. Martin front and center, no longer kneeling but standing, but now surrounded by family, by children and grandchildren, by evidence that choosing mercy had consequences that echoed through decades. The camera clicked. The flash froze the moment. Time bent backward and forward simultaneously. 1945 and 1975 existing in the same photograph. The same people, the same choice, the same grace. Captain James Holloway died February 14, 1983, age 72. Heart attack in his sleep. Peaceful. Martin Richter delivered the eulogy at the funeral, stood before a packed courthouse in Richmond, and told the story of 14 boys and fried chicken and mercy. This man chose kindness when the world expected cruelty, Martin said. He saw children when others saw enemies. He fed us when he could have killed us. He gave us a future when we expected only death. Because of him, 14 boys became men who built instead of destroyed, who fed instead of starved, who chose mercy because mercy had been chosen for them. His legacy is not measured in cases won or nors passed. His legacy is measured in lives changed, in kindness multiplied, in mercy becoming the foundation for everything that followed. Sergeant Owen McAllister died June 1991, age 74. Cancer. Martin flew to Iowa for the funeral, left the cast-iron skillet at the graveside. The pan had cooked its last meal. Let it rest with the man who had used it to save lives. Private Elijah Foster died December 1998, age 77. Stroke. Martin's daughter Anna attended the funeral in Boston, returned the St. Christopher Medal to Foster's family with a letter explaining what it had meant. The Holloway McAllister Centers operate in 6 countries now: Germany, Austria, Poland, France, Italy, United States. 1,200 young people served annually, all of them fed, all of them taught, all of them shown that humanity is stronger than hatred. Every center has the same photograph in the entrance. Holloway, McAllister, Foster, Martin front and center, black and white, 1945. The moment when mercy began to multiply. Martin Richter, interviewed in 2005 at age 74, was asked the same question everyone asks. Why? Why was America kind to German boys? His answer never changed. Not America, not Germany, not sides. 3 men who chose to see children instead of enemies. That choice changed 14 lives. Those 14 lives changed thousands more. Kindness multiplies. Hatred divides. Choose multiplication. He died in 2011, age 80, surrounded by family in Munich. His last words were in English. "Thank you, Captain. I kept my promise. I became what she wanted." At his funeral, they served fried chicken. The recipe handed down from a grandmother in Iowa to her grandson, to 14 boys, to thousands of children who learned that sometimes, in the darkest moments, someone chooses mercy. And that choice echoes through time like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that never stop. The End. Based on true accounts of American soldiers showing mercy to child combatants. April to May 1945, Bavaria. The Holloway McAllister Centers continue operation in Martin Richter's memory, feeding and educating children caught in conflicts not of their making. Every boy deserves to eat without fear. Every child deserves a second chance. Every enemy deserves to be seen as human first. Captain James Holloway, 1945.